Hi, from Studio One at the Center for Online Innovation and Production at the University of Florida. My name is Brenda Such. Welcome to the first episode of COIPcast, where we talk about new, trending, and even just fascinating technologies in online education. And today we want to explore more how ChatGPT can be used in online courses. So joining us today is the instructor for one of the most popular courses in the Quest program, IDS 2935, Can We Design Better Humans? Should We? Dr. Brian Harfe.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit more about your course, IDS 2935, Can We Design Better Humans? Should We?
Sure. So this is a course that I've wanted to teach for many, many years. And I finally just kind of bit the bullet and designed the course and then taught it this past semester. So the course is for any student. It's a Quest course, so any student can take it. I've had in the course music performance majors and biomedical engineers and everybody else in between. So the course is about what you just said and what the title is should we design better humans and can we design them? So the course takes the students through an introduction of what DNA is, because you have to know what DNA is, and kind of a basic background of that field. And then we get into the kind of what I call the core of the course, which is describing what is possible in the field of human cloning and genetic engineering. And then we really get into the ethics of should we be able to do things like clone a new person, genetically modify a human embryo, and the students, as you might imagine, have very divergent views depending on their background, their knowledge. Interestingly, not because of their major. So different majors, it doesn't really seem to matter. But what really the students kind of influences their views in the course is really, interestingly, their religion background and also their scientific knowledge.
So let's go ahead and look at the discussion one.
Yeah, so these are discussion posts. So 10 discussion posts in the course. This is
it's a different essay.
I had no input in you picking up, but there's two.
Be interesting.
Really
just check the references. Let's see if the chatbot used different ones or the same ones. Still writing.
Right.
Where there was no internet.
Yeah, so again, it's short. So those four arguments, each one of those four should really be a paragraph to two paragraphs. That's what the students wrote. Yeah, so here's a different reference.
Discussion, the 10 of them each ended up.
So this is the same one.
Okay.
Now, saying that, these are the two people that are leaders in the field. So you'd expect multiple students to have that reference.
I'm one of your students and I want to use GPT-4 for this discussion, here I go.
They did the same reference again. So, yeah.
So back to what you were saying, different from the first time you used
I know
ChatGPT was.
Scholar, the
GPT is talking
like
as if
citations
they're thinking this as an 18-year-old in the 1970s, which is an interesting consideration.
Yeah, like these are very highly cited to begin with, so maybe the chatbot is pulling those because they're very popular.
This is working too hard. This is not really a student's work. Okay.
And also, clearly one of the things that it can't do is it can't respond to the student's posts.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't know what the posts are. Now, a student could take
they look at the same.
Put it into the chatbot and say,
what's a response? Right.
That is, and there are journals that have come out with positions
Again, this is
on should you or can you use chatbots to write your paper / help you write your paper. And one journal, actually I believe Science, has come out with a very strong position that they consider it plagiarism if you use a chatbot in any way.
Right.
And you can't get around that by putting the chatbot as a co-author because they said you have to defend your data that you put in there, and the chatbot can't defend as an author, can't defend their data. That's kind of the more extreme position. Most journals have a little bit softer position. This is scientific journals have a little bit softer position on using a chatbot to help you write your paper. So yeah, but yes, that's a whole nother topic.
Would be a response. Now, interestingly, as an aside, this whole assignment, the initial response and the two responses to your classmates,
so
all graded by an AI.
discussion one.
So we never graded these as the TAs.
Interesting.
As the instructor. So the AI graded these things in the course, which worked pretty well.
How did what AI?
So we
Did
used
you use?
Perusal.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
Perusal.
Perusal in the course.
That's right.
We
To
spot check them.
yes.
There were some issues in that sometimes the students would separate their posts. They respond to 2 students in one post.
Oh.
And it would grade it as
okay.
a single one. So the student would send me an email, and I just go in, I'd see it, and I'd have to just modify their responses. I also spot checked them to make sure it was working. But it actually worked really well. Saved us as an instructor.
Sure, sure.
You have 260 students times 3 posts for each student per week. It can get pretty intense in the grading.
It would be really interesting to see if, like, for example, if we took one of these AI responses, put it in Perusal, and have AI grade it to see.
So
like,
these are discussion posts. So 10
really
discussion posts in the course.
like
this is
AI
one of my.
versus AI. But it,
I had no input in you picking them, but there's 2 that I really like. This is 100%.
Right.
Just because it puts
Yeah,
students in a time
So
period
then,
before they were born,
let me, just for the
where
sake of
there
our
was no
testing, I'm
internet
going to
and the
run this through
newspapers
one
were
more
king on
time to
giving you
see
information.
potentially what
so they all have to
new
comment. They have to write an
responses come out
initial
of this.
response, and they have to comment on 2 of their classmates to get full credit. The discussion, I think, ended up being the 10 of them each ended up being 1 point in the total grade. So 10.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great response.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it has an opinion. It's not, something bland like I agree.
Oh, look, we're getting something new.
Yeah, you're getting another annotation here. So
Oh,
it's giving your
no.
classmates post, which it doesn't even know what the post is.
Right. I can relate to your sense of fear and fascination after reading the headline. That's interesting.
Yeah, so now this response may not be correct because if the student
Correct.
didn't have
I'll tell you right now, even before it's finished, this is way longer than any of the students' responses.
A third
The students would write
So these would have to line up
1 paragraph. Right. And also, clearly,
So in a
one
sense,
of the
if
things that it
I'm
can't
the
do is
student
it can't
who's getting
respond
these
to
3
2 other students'
annotations,
posts, right?
I
Because
would
it
just
doesn't
go
know
find
what the posts are.
someone
Now, a student
response
could
that
take
matches this.
another student's post, put it into the chat bot, and say, write a response, and get a response.
Just glean.
Pick a student's.
Again, this is such a low stakes,
Right.
so it's 3 responses a week. Well, 1 of your posts and 2 responses,
Sure.
so it's 0.33 of a
Sure,
point
sure.
in a 100-point course.
Right.
So that's a lot of effort
Right.
to get 1 point. I'm not saying students wouldn't do that, but this is a pretty easy assignment for a student to do,
Okay.
especially when they're commenting on other students' posts. Generally, if a student wrote this, and then another student was commenting on it, another student probably would write 1 or 2 sentences.
It would take more work to
and probably get full line up with
So then
what
with
the student
this,
was
it sounds like your
responding to,
response is
AI
because
doesn't
it's
know,
low
what
stakes,
the other students wrote.
it would be more effort for the discussion at least to then use GPT-4 to
You
to
could
generate
absolutely do that.
something. So the thought
What I
is
would
that
hope would
it's
happen,
low
because that's a
stakes,
pain in the
students are
neck,
getting
is they would
practice,
read
whether they
these
use it or not.
and just pick a student's,
And that if they do,
pick
maybe
what a
they
student
can edit,
wrote,
modify, etc.
and say, okay, these are potential answers, and then kind of modify them or edit them and come up with their own version. That's what I hope would happen as an instructor. I have no way of knowing if that actually does
It was a
happen
learning experience,
as an
right?
instructor. But again, this is a relatively low stakes
Good.
part of
So
the
it's
course.
meeting your
so
learning
I
objectives as well.
don't know. But I would hope that the students would use the chatbot kind of
Okay.
as kind of a crutch, or in all honesty, probably avoid
Okay.
it, because
So
it's
then,
just so
after this
it-
whole experience,
yeah. Now I'll say at
seeing
the end
that
of the
you
course
might
I
have to
have,
make
and
some
I don't know what the results
modifications
yet are,
for the
because
next iteration of the course.
grading's due Monday.
What are
so
your
and today
changes
is Thursday.
you think
Thursday? Today's
those
Thursday,
would
I
be?
believe. No, Wednesday. Today's Wednesday. Oh my gosh, that gives me an extra day to grade. So there is. Well, I got 1 more day back. Yeah. So which my TAs will be very happy about. So there, I have surveys in the course, and the last course survey, I actually asked the question of how many students use the chat bot in the course, and then I asked the question, and it's anonymous. So. And I point that out, so if they admit using it, that's perfectly fine. I'll never know. And I have encouraged them, but I also say, have you used it to just copy and paste, or have you used it to give yourself ideas about how to answer a question that was posed in the course? So it'll be interesting to see what that data looks like. I'll also, the course has about a little bit more than half the course is face-to-face, and the other part of it is online. So it'll be interesting.
You
if there's a
definitely
difference
have
in
a
that
clone.
response
I
based on
cannot
students that were
believe you do
100% online
all
in the
that
course
work, and you have
and the
twin
students that were
16-year-olds.
face-to-face for
They're
the entire
driving
course.
people.
So. Yeah. Yeah, and I'll also know the students' majors. So I'll be able to correlate the majors to the response. It'll be interesting if a certain major. Well, that's the hope. Yeah, the hope is to take the data and publish it. I thought you were going to ask the question: Do I think I'll have a different response based on the major? And that I don't know. So, like, is a computer science or related major more likely to understand or use it, or
that's
is it
nice. You consulted them. Tell me what you want.
They may not know as much about the topic to begin with, but we'll see.
So anyway, the group project is 15% of the course. It doesn't have anything to do with what we discussed today, but 10, it's 15 points.
So I don't know. I will not know the students' ages because I didn't ask. But I do have online. There's two populations of students. One is residential students taking the course 100% online, and the other population is UFO, University of Florida online students. And we have data that their ages, on general, they're an older population. So we can do the comparison between those two populations also. Should be interesting. Exactly, right. Yeah, that's the plan over time, to see if more and more students are using chatbots to help them in the course.
Because you have to work with another individual. And again, that has a lot of other issues, which I'm not sure would benefit the students' learning outcomes in the course. I thought about other things, like, for example, I'm seeing what the question is, but another version of that could be something along the lines of having the students come up with a hypothetical disease. So they just have to come up with a new disease, and maybe a chatbot.
Yeah, and I'll also say, I mean, look, if they put this in, if they went to all that effort to get 1 point in the class, and they put this in and they read everything this chatbot just put in there, they probably learned just as much as I hope they would have learned from answering the prompt themselves.
Would you?
In this part of the course, absolutely, I'd be fine with them just reading this information here and going, okay.
So then, after this whole experience, seeing that you might have
disease.
Modifications for
I've never tried this entire chapter.
I'm actually, who is it? We had someone write like a short story.
So I've just started to think about that, because
Is that
again, the
real,
course
though?
is not officially
Okay.
even completed yet for this version of it, and I have all summer to try to see what happens. And there's going to be new versions, I'm sure, and it's not just ChatGPT, right? There's other ones out there that do slightly different things. So I've thought a little bit about that. You probably get a different answer, if you ask me this in August when the semester starts up again. But one of the things
I am one of the most gullible people you're
there is a
gonna
group
meet.
project in the course.
I would read this and be like, oh my
Group
gosh, I
projects,
need to go
will fully
Wikipedia
admit,
this.
have issues.
And there's
around
symptoms.
The kind
This
of
is
the
longer
context
than your
of one
essay.
student maybe doing more
Should make
work
the
or less
students
work
do
and not
this.
fairly getting a grade based on the amount of work they actually did.
Cognitive
This is,
decline.
I have twin. My wife and I have twin 16-year-olds
Okay.
in high school, and they cannot
So they just
stand group.
tweaked a known disease.
No, I have no clone. That's at least,
Age spots.
as far as I'm aware, I don't have a clone, which is another part of the course of making clones without you knowing you have a
Oh,
clone.
here we go.
But my students do not like group projects. I mean, sorry, my kids
said yes.
made it very clear that they
Potential
do
to
not
cure.
like group projects in high school. Yeah. So when I designed the group project in the course,
This is
they
the paid
had
version.
a large amount of input in making sure that
nice.
not all the grade went towards one person that did most of the work or someone that did not do
Do you
most of
think
the work.
most
get
of your
most of the credit.
students,
So
especially
anyway,
the
the group
ones that
project
aren't
is 15%
science
of the
related,
course.
would even
It
understand?
doesn't have
like,
anything to
half
do with
of
what we
it?
discussed today.
Right.
But 10 it's 15 points. 10 points of that
Okay.
is based on individual work, and then 5 points is based.
So this question here, going back to this, is that okay? You have a hypothetical disease.
Yeah, this is actually pretty long. I've never seen a response this long
And
from a
we talk
chatbot.
about therapeutic cloning.
Yes.
The difference between therapeutic and human cloning is therapeutic cloning is
All right, so this is quite a good answer. Just reading off the top of my head here, as the chatbot is generating the data.
the vast majority of the class, and I'd say you get the data now. The class
What it's writing right now?
is reading all the essays and
A lot of this stuff was covered in the course, and it's at a pretty general level.
creating a new
So the second part of it was, and this would be a pretty good answer, would be,
hypothetical disease that can
would you use this? So ask them their views on on this cloning, right, which I'm sure the chatbot could do fine, but then ask the student, would you have used change if you had the disease, or if your parent had the disease, or if your child had the disease? The child part is interesting just in general in the course, because for the most part, especially the face-to-face students, which are the 18, 19-year-olds,
So I'm typing in right
kids.
now. Would you clone yourself
so their
to
views
cure
are much different than my views on what I would do,
an
because I have kids.
incurable disease?
Well, they were like,
that you
well,
have
just give you an
acquired?
example.
Is that
before we
legit?
get into this, is that one of the things in the course was to ask them, would you use IVF? And should you use IVF? And should insurance cover IVF? And Florida does not. That is correct. So Massachusetts does. Florida does not.
Sure.
Yeah, I've had friends that moved to Massachusetts just to do IVF because it's very expensive. So I asked the students, should insurance cover IVF, and should it be available? And most of the students agree that it should be available, but the vast majority of the students said that IVF should not be covered by insurance because it is a voluntarily activity. It's not a life change. It's not a life-saving technology, right? So it's not like if you have a heart valve defect and you need to be repaired. But none of them have kids, and they said. Or not fertile. And I do point out before this conversation that about 10% of you in this room, going by statistics, are going to, if you want to have kids, about 10% of you in this room will not be able to have kids. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. And the response, and we did small groups on this topic also, the response was, is that, well, I don't, and this is a generalization, right? So I'm generalizing 260 students.
Well, I mean, I'm just asking you like in the last 5 seconds,
and the reason is because you can adopt.
There are interesting ways that you
and what I pointed out to them is that it's much different psychologically of having a biological child for most people than adopting. And a lot of people would not make the decision to adopt over having biological children themselves. And of course, that's great variation through the population. But I think that the representative opinion in the classroom is not the representative opinion of people trying to have kids that cannot have kids. And they generally, in my experience, knowing a number of people in the situation, are not really thinking about adopting. They're thinking about,
wow, so it sounds like this
whole
whole experience.
So,
it's not
the
just
opinions of 18 and 19-year-olds
are being accomplished,
different
but
than my
even
opinion as
pushing
a 50
you to
plus
make
year
better
old.
questions. Make
so
a stronger
this
course.
question here, going back to this, is that, okay, you have a hypothetical disease. Would you now use cloning to help cure it? And we talked about therapeutic cloning and the difference between therapeutic.
As you're dealing with using something like GPT-4, what is that impetus in you that keeps you going and wanting to just, again, ride that wave of using new technology in your courses?
She's going to get a job, a real job. So the TAs that were face-to-face, what they did is they came to my small group first. So I get a small group on Wednesday. Small groups were 22 students. So the two TAs that were doing face-to-face small groups would come on Wednesday to my session, and then their session was the next day on Thursday. So they could kind of see what I was doing and how I ran the small groups on these various different topics, and how my students interacted. And I told my students that they were kind of the test students because this is the first time the course ran. They always got the first breakout session where I had no idea if it was going to work or not. Sometimes things didn't work. And then the TAs, when they went the next day and did it for their students, they could actually improve on what I did. As far as the chatbots go, that lecture I actually recorded. So they gave a version of that lecture, the TAs, after I gave it, but the students, even the face-to-face students, had access to the one I recorded here, actually in COIP. So that was for the online students, but I also made that available for the face-to-face students to see it.
You're going to write a question that
So we're looking here.
will take students to places where they couldn't go without the aid of something like a chatbot, then you need to teach the students how to use it. And I started that this course, I gave them an hour lecture on what it was, and I encouraged them to use it, but I think you'd have to do specific directions in small groups that would be very easy to do, taking them through, this is what it is, this is how you use it. Now, if it's going to cost money, different universities have different policies, but here at UF, we can't require them to buy something like this. You could if it was a course material.
Yeah, I mean, this is, this response, just very quickly reading it, is very general. It's not very specific. I would expect a little bit more. Again, this is a hypothetical question that no student has ever answered. I would expect if I was grading this a little bit more specificity on their exact views of what they would do and why they would do it. But the other part of this is I can have them ask their parents, right? But there's problems with that, right? Because some of the students may not have parents that they can go to ask those questions. You can say, yeah, so someone, a relative, a sibling.
Okay. Well, I think we definitely have covered an expanse of your course to your first iteration of using ChatGPT to testing things out now.
And it's going to differ. You get different answers from anyone you ask that question. For me,
is there anything else?
I think it allows.
You'd like to add?
I think I said this earlier. Allows students to maybe go places in this assignment or any assignment that you can use this sort of technology, or really any technology, to places where they couldn't before. So it allows them maybe to answer the question in a more in-depth way, where before they would give you a general answer, but the chatbot can give you a general answer. So now it allows me to ask maybe some more details that I would not expect them to be able to answer without the aid of, say, a chatbot. Saying that, then you assume that everyone's using the chatbot, right? Because if everyone's not using the chatbot, you can't ask those questions, right? So you have to put something in it, and I haven't done this yet, but I've seen at other universities people writing about this now in the literature, where they teach the student how to use the chatbot. It doesn't matter; it can be a science class.
I think that makes it exciting. I think there's been
you will use
feedback in undergraduate education that it's the same courses,
and that's expected. So if you're going to write a question that
like exactly what you're saying
will take students to places where they couldn't go without the aid of something like a chatbot,
the door
then you need to
enter
teach
in
the
your
students how
online
to use
course.
And I started that this course. I gave them an hour lecture on what it was, and I encouraged them to use it. But I think you'd have to do specific directions.
Right. We'll have a fresh
groups
experience.
That would be very easy to do, taking them through. This is what it is.
Well, thank you. That was a wonderful conversation. I learned a lot. I learned about fake diseases. I learned about real cloning. So thank you so much for joining our first episode. And thank you for those listening and watching our first episode of COIPcast. And we look forward to seeing you again. Until next time.